Midnight settles over the Winchester estate like a heavy curtain. Inside, a single oil lamp trembles in Sarah Winchester's hand as she moves through a hallway that didn't exist that morning. Behind her, a carpenter waits for instructions. He's used to this. She points to a blank stretch of wall and whispers, "Here, build a door. Make sure it leads nowhere." For a moment, the house is silent. Then a distant floorboard groans, as if something unseen is walking just out of sight. And Sarah, widowed heir to a rifle fortune, keeps building, because she believes if she stops, the dead will find her. Sarah Lockwood Pardee was born in 1839 into a world of New England privilege and enlightened ambition. Her father was a master carriage maker, wealthy but not dynastic, comfortable but not extravagant. Sarah was extraordinary from the beginning. She spoke 4 languages fluently by age 12. She played piano with such precision that neighbours gathered on summer evenings just to listen through open windows. Her teachers called her gifted. Her parents called her their marvel. In an era when most women received decorative educations, Sarah studied mathematics, literature, and music theory with genuine rigour. She was small in stature, barely 4 feet 10 inches tall. But her presence filled rooms. In 1862, at 23, she married William Wirt Winchester, handsome, educated, and heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. The timing could not have been more significant. America was tearing itself apart. The Civil War raged across battlefields from Gettysburg to Antietam, and the Winchester rifle, nicknamed the gun you could load on Sunday and fire all week, was becoming the most sought-after weapon in the conflict. Union soldiers treasured it. Confederate forces stole it from fallen enemies. Indigenous nations feared it. Oliver Winchester, William's father, had transformed a failing shirt manufacturer into an arms empire. The 1860 Henry rifle, predecessor to the Winchester, could fire 16 rounds without reloading. In a war still dominated by single-shot muskets, this was revolutionary. It was devastating. It was profitable beyond measure. By 1866, the Winchester Model 1866 hit the market. Over 700,000 rifles sold in the following decades. The company's New Haven factory ran 3 shifts. Smoke from the forges never stopped rising. Sarah Winchester became one of the wealthiest young women in America simply by saying, "I do." But wealth, she would learn, has a weight. In 1866, Sarah gave birth to a daughter. They named her Annie Pardee Winchester. The baby had her mother's delicate frame, her father's dark eyes. For weeks, Sarah barely slept, not from exhaustion, but from joy. She would sit in the nursery for hours watching Annie breathe. 44 days later, Annie was dead. Marasmus, the doctors called it. A wasting disease. A failure to thrive. In truth, they didn't know. Medicine in 1866 could name suffering but rarely cure it. Sarah held her daughter's body and felt something inside herself break in a way that would never fully mend. The house in New Haven became unbearable. Every room whispered Annie's name. Every silence screamed her absence. William tried to comfort his wife. He failed. How could he not? What words exist for such a loss? Sarah withdrew into music, into books, into long stretches of staring at nothing. 15 years passed in a kind of muted grief. Then, in 1881, William fell ill, tuberculosis. The same disease that had ravaged New England families for generations. He wasted away over months, coughing blood into handkerchiefs, growing thinner and paler until he barely resembled himself. William Winchester died in March of that year. Sarah, at 41, was alone, childless, widowed, and staggeringly, almost incomprehensibly wealthy. William left her roughly $20 million, nearly $600 million in today's currency. She also inherited a 50% stake in the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, guaranteeing her an income of approximately $1,000 per day, every single day. For the rest of her life, she could buy anything, go anywhere, do anything. Instead, she felt haunted. The exact details are murky, softened by time and rumour. But the story goes like this. Sarah, desperate for answers, visited a Boston medium named Adam Coons. Spiritualism was everywhere in the 1880s. Seances filled parlours. Grieving families paid handsomely to hear voices from beyond. Whether you believed or not didn't matter, Enough people did to make it a cultural force. Coons told Sarah what she feared most. The spirits of everyone killed by Winchester rifles were restless. Thousands of souls, soldiers, frontiersmen, native warriors, innocent bystanders caught in crossfire, they died because of the weapon her family built. And now, Coons said, they were coming for her. But there was a way to confuse them, to stay ahead, to survive. She must go west, find a house, and never stop building it. As long as construction continued, the spirits would be disoriented, unable to settle, unable to find her. The moment the hammers stopped, she would be vulnerable. Whether Sarah believed this completely or whether she simply needed a structure to contain her formless grief, we'll never know. But in 1884, she boarded a train to California. She brought trunks filled with black mourning dresses. She brought her wealth. And she brought a mission that would consume the next 38 years of her life. She would build and build and never, ever stop. Sarah arrived in San Jose in 1884 and immediately purchased an 8-room farmhouse on 161 acres of land. The property sat in the Santa Clara Valley, surrounded by orchards and open fields, pleasant, unremarkable, ordinary. Within weeks, it became anything but. Construction began the moment the deed was signed. Sarah hired a foreman and gave him one simple, impossible instruction. The work must never stop. Not for holidays, not for weather, not for anything. Carpenters worked in rotating shifts, day crew, night crew, midnight crew. The sound of hammers and saws became the house's heartbeat. Constant, relentless, eternal. Neighbours watched the farmhouse begin to grow, a wing here, a tower there, rooms sprouting like architectural mushrooms. But this was no ordinary expansion. Sarah Winchester didn't hire an architect. She designed the additions herself, sketching plans on paper and napkins and whatever surface was available. She would wake in the middle of the night, rush to find a worker, and demand immediate changes. A wall that had been framed that morning would be torn down by evening. A hallway approved on Monday would be reversed by Wednesday. The house began to defy logic. Staircases were built that led directly into ceilings. You could climb 7 steps and find yourself pressed against plaster, going nowhere. Doors opened onto brick walls. Some opened onto sheer drops. Step through, and you'd fall 10 feet into the garden below. Windows were installed in floors. Other windows looked from one interior room into another interior room, revealing nothing but more wallpaper. One hallway stretched 40 feet, turned a corner, and dead-ended at a single window barely a foot wide. There were chimneys that stopped short of the roof, venting smoke into the attic. There were closets with 30 hooks for coats, but only enough space to hold one. Spider web motifs appeared everywhere, carved into cabinets, pressed into windows, woven into drain covers. 13 became her obsession. Chandeliers with 13 candles, staircases with 13 steps, rooms with 13 windows. Some have speculated the number 13 held spiritual significance. Others suggest it was simply a pattern her mind latched onto in its spiral toward obsession. The house grew in impossible directions. By 1900 it contained over 100 rooms, 47 fireplaces, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 6 kitchens, dozens of bedrooms, 3 working elevators powered by hydraulic rams, a ballroom with hand-inlaid parquet floors and a massive stained glass window that cost $1,500, a fortune for a single pane. Sarah spared no expense. She imported Tiffany glass from New York. She ordered wood from forests across the world. Rare hardwoods, expensive marble, gold and silver chandeliers. The house became a museum of excess, each room more lavish than the last. And yet, the oddities persisted. One servant's passage was so narrow that workers had to turn sideways to move through it. Another hallway required you to climb up, then down, then up again for no discernible reason. The second-floor door that opened to a 20-foot drop. It remained. Sarah never had it sealed. The construction consumed money at an astonishing rate. Conservative estimates suggest she spent over $5 million on the house over 38 years. In today's currency, that's roughly $75 million. Some historians believe the true number was higher. Every day her Winchester dividend arrived. Every day it poured into the house. The workers were loyal, but bewildered. Carpenters who stayed for years learned not to question. If Mrs. Winchester wanted a door to nowhere, you built a door to nowhere. If she wanted a window in the floor, you installed a window in the floor. Some claimed she held midnight seances in a special room, communicating with spirits who dictated the building plans. Whether this was true or simply gossip repeated until it calcified into legend remains unclear. What is clear? Sarah lived alone in a house built for hundreds. She employed a rotating staff of servants, gardeners, maids, cooks, drivers. But she kept them at a distance. She ate her meals in isolation, often in different rooms each night. She slept in a different bedroom almost every evening, rotating through the mansion as if trying to stay one step ahead of something. Or someone. Her daily routine became ritualistic. She would wake, inspect the previous night's construction, make notes, sketch new plans, then retreat into the house's interior. Visitors were rare. She granted almost no interviews. When salesmen came to the door, servants turned them away. When neighbours inquired about the construction, they received polite deflections. The house became her world and her prison. One architect who briefly consulted on a project later described the experience as maddening. Sarah would approve a design, then change it 3 times before it was half built. She insisted on secrecy. Workers were forbidden from discussing projects with each other. Different crews built different sections with no knowledge of what lay beyond their assigned walls. The result was architectural chaos held together by sheer force of will and unlimited money. But beneath the oddities, there was method, or at least there was emotional logic. The staircases to nowhere, escape routes that couldn't be followed, the doors to walls, barriers that couldn't be breached, the endless hallways, paths that led pursuers in circles. If you believed spirits were hunting you, the house made perfect sense. Every bizarre feature became a defense, every addition a tactic. Sarah was building a maze, and she was hiding at its center. By 1906, the Winchester mansion had become one of the most famous houses in California. Newspapers ran stories speculating about the reclusive widow and her ever-growing architectural monstrosity. Some called her mad, others called her brilliant, most simply called her strange. But Sarah didn't read the papers. She didn't care what San Jose society thought. She had a house to build, spirits to confuse, time to buy. The hammers kept swinging, the saws kept cutting, the house kept growing, and somewhere inside, Sarah Winchester kept running. At 5:12 in the morning on April 18th, 1906, the earth beneath San Jose began to move. The San Francisco earthquake, one of the most powerful in American history, tore through Northern California with merciless force. The initial shock measured 7.9 on the Richter scale. Buildings in San Francisco collapsed into rubble. Fires raged for days. Over 3,000 people died. 40 miles south, the Winchester mansion shook like a child's toy. Sarah was asleep in one of the house's many bedrooms when the first tremor hit. Walls cracked, windows shattered. The massive 7-story tower, Sarah's pride, visible for miles, swayed, groaned, and then collapsed inward, taking entire sections of the house with it. Chimneys toppled, ceilings caved. The labyrinth Sarah had spent 22 years building began to tear itself apart. She was trapped. For hours, Sarah sat in darkness, surrounded by broken beams and fallen plaster, unable to open the door. The earthquake had shifted the house's frame just enough to jam it shut. She could hear servants shouting her name, could hear the settling creaks of a structure barely holding itself together, but she couldn't move, couldn't escape. Finally, workers broke through. They found her shaken but unharmed, covered in dust, clutching the arms of her chair. Any reasonable person would have abandoned the house, condemned it, torn it down and started fresh somewhere safer. Sarah did the opposite. She ordered the destroyed sections sealed, not demolished, sealed. Workers boarded up entire wings, entombing hallways filled with rubble. The grand 7-story tower, gone. But instead of clearing the wreckage, she had it covered, hidden, forgotten. Rooms that had been opulent now lay in permanent darkness, preserved like archaeological ruins. Then she ordered construction to resume, immediately. The earthquake, in Sarah's mind, was not a warning to stop. It was confirmation she must continue. If the house stopped growing, the spirits would settle. They would find her. The shaking earth was their anger made manifest. So the hammers returned, the saws sang again. and the Winchester mansion, wounded but unbroken, continued to spread. But something had changed. Sarah's isolation deepened. Before the earthquake, she occasionally received visitors, distant relatives, business associates managing her Winchester dividends. After 1906, she saw almost no one. She communicated with staff through written notes. She took her meals alone, often eating the same simple foods repeatedly. Servants reported seeing her walking the halls late at night, oil lamp in hand, inspecting rooms, whispering to walls. The séances, if they had ever been occasional, became nightly rituals. Sarah believed the spirits spoke to her, guided her, warned her. Some nights she would wake her foreman at 2 a.m. and demand a new wing be added to the east side. Other nights she would order entire completed sections torn down because the spirits disapproved. The house became less a structure and more a conversation, a physical manifestation of an invisible, dialogue only Sarah could hear. Her wealth, though vast, began to show strain. $5 million spent, crews working around the clock for decades, materials imported from around the world. The house was a financial black hole, consuming money faster than most people could imagine earning it. Her Winchester dividends continued, $1,000 per day every day, but even that staggering sum struggled to keep pace with her building obsession. She started cutting costs in strange ways. Expensive Tiffany windows in one room, cheap pine boards in the next, gold inlay in the ballroom, unfinished walls in servants' quarters. The house became a patchwork of wealth and haste, luxury and paranoia. Rumours in San Jose evolved from curiosity to genuine concern. People whispered that Sarah had lost her mind completely, that she wandered the halls talking to ghosts, that she built the house on the instructions of the dead. Some claimed to see lights moving through windows at impossible hours. Others swore they heard construction sounds even when no workers were present. The truth was somehow both simpler and more tragic. Sarah wasn't insane. She was grief-stricken. She wasn't possessed. She was coping with trauma the only way she knew how. The house wasn't a haunted mansion. It was a monument to loss, built by a woman who had loved deeply, lost everything, and never recovered. But understanding her pain didn't make it less destructive. In 1910, Sarah nearly stopped. The financial drain, the isolation, the exhaustion. For a few weeks, the construction slowed. Workers waited for instructions that didn't come. The house, for the first time in 26 years, approached silence. Then Sarah emerged from her rooms and ordered expansion on the south wing. Larger than before, more elaborate, more desperate. The obsession had locked back in, and this time it would not release her until death did. The house devoured her remaining years, every waking moment bent toward its expansion, every dollar funneled into its endless corridors. Sarah Winchester, who had once been a brilliant young woman fluent in 4 languages, became a ghost in her own creation. A shadow moving through hallways that twisted back on themselves, climbing staircases that led nowhere, opening doors to walls. She was hiding from the dead, but in doing so she had buried herself alive. Sarah Winchester died in her sleep on September 5th, 1922. She was 83 years old. The construction stopped instantly. Carpenters dropped their tools mid-task when word reached them. A half-driven nail remained in a beam. Sawdust lay scattered across unfinished floors. Sketches for the next edition sat on a table, never to be executed. For 38 years the house had been in constant motion. Now suddenly it was still. The silence must have been deafening. Sarah's will revealed a woman who'd given everything to the house and expected nothing in return. She left generous bequests to her servants, those who had stayed loyal despite the strangeness, despite the midnight hammering, despite the architectural madness. Her Winchester stock dividends went to her niece. The house itself, with all its oddities and obsessions, went to her niece as well. The new owner walked through the mansion and tried to make sense of what she'd inherited. 161 rooms. But that count was approximate. Some rooms were so hidden, so embedded in the maze, that an accurate total seemed impossible. 47 fireplaces, though some led nowhere. Over 10,000 windows, many overlooking nothing but interior walls. 2,000 doors, a significant percentage opening to brick or air. 40 staircases, several terminating in ceilings. 13 bathrooms, luxurious by 1922 standards. Miles of hallways, countless sealed chambers, and rooms within rooms within rooms, nested like Russian dolls. The estate auction was swift and brutal. Sarah's belongings, furniture, art, personal items accumulated over decades, sold for a fraction of their value. A Tiffany window worth thousands went for hundreds. Rare imported woods were carted away by bargain hunters. The house, that magnificent bizarre testament to one woman's grief and fear, sold for $135,000. A pittance, an insult. But the new owner saw opportunity. In the 1920s, America was falling in love with the macabre. Ghost stories sold newspapers. Haunted houses drew crowds. The Winchester Mansion, with its history and architectural strangeness, was perfect. In 1923, it opened as a tourist attraction. 5 months after Sarah's death, strangers were walking through her private sanctuary, gawking at doors to nowhere, laughing at staircases to ceilings. The marketing leaned into the ghostly narrative. Brochures promised supernatural thrills. Tour guides whispered about seances and spirits, and a widow driven mad by guilt. The house that Sarah built to hide became a spectacle, and people came by the thousands. Over the decades, the Winchester Mystery House became an American icon. It appeared in films, books, documentaries. Paranormal investigators brought equipment to measure cold spots and electromagnetic fields. Skeptics rolled their eyes. Believers insisted they'd felt presences, heard voices, seen shadows. But beneath the ghost stories and tourist attractions, a more complex truth remained. Sarah Winchester was not a madwoman. She was a grieving mother and widow who lived in an era that had no language for trauma, no therapy for loss, no treatment for what we would now recognize as severe depression and anxiety. Spiritualism wasn't insanity. It was the closest thing to counseling available in 1880s America. And the house, for all its strangeness, was her way of creating meaning from unbearable pain. Think about what she accomplished. A woman in the late 1800s, personally directing a construction project that lasted nearly 4 decades. She managed budgets, hired and fired workers, made thousands of design decisions, and created something utterly unique. Yes, it was chaotic. Yes, it was excessive. But it was also hers. The doors that led nowhere. Perhaps they represented escape routes from a grief that had no exit. The staircases to ceilings. Maybe they were attempts to reach something, or someone, just out of grasp. The endless additions. A way to fill the unbearable emptiness left by a daughter who lived 44 days and a husband who died too soon. We'll never know if Sarah truly believed in the spirits. We'll never know if the medium's warning was genuine fear or convenient excuse. But we know this. She needed a reason to wake up each morning. She needed a purpose after everything she loved had died, and the house became that purpose. Some historians argue the Winchester Mystery House is a monument to guilt, a physical manifestation of blood money turned into architectural penance. They point to the rifle fortune, to the thousands killed by Winchester weapons, to Sarah's supposed desire to appease their spirits. Others see it differently. They see a woman exercising the only form of control available to her. She couldn't bring back Annie, couldn't cure William, couldn't undo the violence that made her wealthy, but she could build. And in building, she could create a world that bent to her will, even if that world made no sense to anyone else. The house stands today, mostly unchanged. Tourists walk through it daily, marvelling at the oddities, taking photographs of doors to nowhere. Guides tell Sarah's story, sometimes accurately, often embellished. The mystery sells tickets. But maybe the real mystery isn't why Sarah built the house the way she did. Maybe it's why we're still so fascinated by it. Perhaps because we recognize something in her story. The urge to build walls against pain. The desire to create order from chaos, even if that order is visible only to us. The need to keep moving, keep working, keep doing something, anything to avoid facing what we've lost. Sarah Winchester built a labyrinth. But she wasn't the minotaur at its centre. She was the architect and the prisoner both, creating the very maze that trapped her. And when she died, the house revealed its final truth. It wasn't the spirits she was running from. It was herself, her grief, her guilt, her unbearable awareness that all the money in the world couldn't purchase one more day with the people she loved. The Winchester Mystery House is many things: a tourist attraction, an architectural curiosity, a ghost story. But more than anything, It's a reminder that sometimes the structures we build to protect ourselves become the things that define us. Sometimes the walls we raise to keep pain out become the prison we can't escape. Sarah Winchester spent 38 years building, and in the end, what she created wasn't shelter. It was a monument to the truth that grief creates worlds, and sometimes those worlds become prisons we build with our own hands. The Winchester Mystery House still stands in San Jose, still confusing visitors, still raising questions. Sarah's story reminds us that behind every grand estate, every architectural marvel, there's a human story worth understanding. What other legendary estates should we explore? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Sarah Winchester's tragic, fascinating life, consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories about the real people behind history's most mysterious properties. Sometimes the most haunted houses aren't filled with ghosts. They're filled with grief, and understanding that difference changes everything.